But now our third expert, I would like to ask Mrs. Susan Gardner from the UNEP to take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Doris. Happy birthday. Thank you very much also, colleagues, for this opportunity to speak to you today during this webinar and to be a part of this really very interesting panel so far. It's hard to come after these speakers. I just want to start by reflecting that yesterday I had a really inspiring conversation with Sir Nigel Topping, who many of you know is the UK high-level champion for climate action. And his perspective was especially inspiring because he comes to this position from a career working in the private sector. He has a particular vision on how to harness the power of industry to solve environmental challenges by creating a positive reinforcement loop with industry and governments. And he challenges all of us to think about the fact that how we talk about the future actually shapes it. And that when we lay out a vision for the future, we should choose to talk about hope. We should be hopeful instead of worrying about being right. So I take that as we should be ambitious instead of cautious, and that's what I'll try to do today. In this era of COVID-19, it is easy to be pessimistic about the future, but unless we're hopeful, unless we can get a sense of what's possible, we're not going to win. So I will just start by saying that COVID has put a real spotlight on the importance of conserving natural habitats, as we've gained a heightened awareness that a healthy planet is critical to our ability to rebound from the pandemic, as well as to prevent future global disease crises. The deterioration of ecosystems and the biodiversity that they contain increases the risk of zoonotic diseases, and we know that. It's information that's available and is as clear as the kind of information that we heard from Dr. Domenici in terms of her really solid studies about air pollution and other effects for COVID. Our continued erosion of wild spaces has brought us into sort of an uncomfortable, close proximity to wild species that harbor diseases, and those diseases can jump to humans. Human activities now affect 75% of the Earth's land surface. Urbanization has more than doubled in the last 3 decades. More than 3 million hectares of tropical forest was lost or destroyed just in 2018. And so nearly 1 million species face extinction. There have been studies from the West Nile virus and from Lyme disease that have shown that where native biodiversity is high, infectious rates from zoonotic diseases can be lower. But when you have loss of habitat through land conversion, it pushes exotic species off their natural environments, puts them in closer proximity to human populations. Now, COVID-19 provides an opportunity to rebuild a more environmentally responsible world. And just last year, it seems like another world ago, but in 2019, we watched this transition emerge as the world embraced this recognition that investing in nature and nature-based solutions was the most economically sensible and effective approach to creating jobs, to fighting climate change, and to safeguarding health. We observed this global momentum that was fueled by a shared understanding that the true value of nature is not the price of the wood that you can get out of the forest, but it's actually the invaluable services that that ecosystem provides to all of humanity. But there is a danger right now, and we're right at the cusp of decisions by countries could result in relaxing environmental laws as part of a short-term COVID recovery response that could result in long-term environmental damages. The UN Secretary General warned governments should not respond to COVID-19 by making policies and investments that exacerbate existing crises such as air pollution and the climate emergency. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of environmental sustainability in our national response plans. Despite COVID-19, the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement are still our best global roadmap for the future. So where do we go from here? I'd like to offer 3 general recommendations. The first is that building back better should enhance transboundary management of ecosystems to reduce habitat fragmentation as part of strategies to prevent future pandemics. These disease transmissions, they're global, they're regional, and they're local challenges, and so solutions will have to be targeted and context specific. Integrated management is critical to include clean air, water, and waste management. But these efforts can advance the implementation of multilateral environmental agreements by promoting conservation and sustainable management of ecosystems for human health and well-being. Secondly, transformational change for nature and people requires expanded opportunities for investing in nature as part of the global socio-economic response to COVID. And similar as my colleague from IMS, Mr. Tao, was saying, safeguarding nature requires investing in new financial mechanisms to tackle habitat destruction and other anthropogenic threats. We need investments that recognize the immense value of nature and the ecosystem services that are provided, many of which are extremely undervalued in development plans and national economic plans. For example, imagine how much more food production would cost without the free use of natural pollinators. And finally, raising awareness of the linkages between nature and health is key. We need to reframe the narrative for nature so that its true economic value, including the role in preventing future pandemics, is fully appreciated. Across the globe, public information campaigns about COVID-19 have been essential to reduce misinformation and support really well-organized responses for improving public safety. And as a result, behavioral changes occurred at a pace that no one would have ever thought was possible. But now we see that such major global change is possible. Now more than ever, it's essential that we provide communication campaigns and educational content to ensure that public has access to accurate, science-based information to really understand what is the true impact of their daily decisions and what's the great potential of the collective action that we can all take. And just imagine, with 1.5 billion children out of school right now, governments and educators definitely need new, innovative approaches to learning with really meaningful environmental curriculum embedded. The COVID-19 recovery will provide a monumental opportunity to create a better future, as others have said before me. Circling back now to the advice that Sir Nigel Topping gave to me, I would dare to envision the following future. First, that transformational change for nature and people will be part of a global social economic response to COVID-19. That it will involve every nation, every sector, and the continued mobilization of the public. Increased media focus will lead to stronger public environmental consciousness, and that will drive a new way of thinking. It'll create motivation for behavior change on a global scale. And the public will demand that their leaders take action for a healthier planet, for their own good, for their own safety, for their own health. Finally, that in this vision, new and expanded sources of green finance will serve as positive incentives to prevent backsliding on our past environmental achievements because of the recognition of the interdependency of environmental health and public health. So in conclusion, when we finally find ourselves at the end of this COVID crisis, the other global challenges are still going to be out there for us to solve. If we are genuinely going to build back better, investing in the health of our populations will require investing in the health of our planet. And this is critical if we're going to reduce not just the risk of the next pandemic, but the looming threat of climate change and biodiversity loss. We simply can't afford to fall back asleep now that we've had this major wake-up change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Gardner. Thank you to all the three speakers for your kind interventions, also for sticking more or less to the time frame that we had in mind. We have already now 11 registered speakers. So the idea is to now go through, to start the debate and building on the comments and on the valuable remarks of our expert speakers. I'm aware that Mr. Chang might need to leave us a little bit earlier. If that is the case, please let us know when that is going to happen, Mr. Chang, so we can just greet you and thank you again for your time and availability. I would have liked to start now. I mean, the list is long. We have 3 more or less minutes per each speaker. I would have liked to start immediately with Mr. Klaus Kindrup from Germany, who we know is an expert, and I will introduce him. But I know that Mr. Congressman Whitehouse is Senator Whitehouse. I would now kind of ask Ms. Susan Gardner to reflect over what she heard and if she has any final words to tell us. And then I will ask also, of course, Dr. Francesca Dominici to do the same. And finally, we will conclude with the words of our rapporteur. So Susan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for staying with us all the time. And we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, my pleasure. It was an extraordinary conversation, and it's hard to decide what specific things to comment on. So I would just try to reflect on the President's question in terms of what parliamentarians can do by first thanking Andorra and Belgium for remembering to celebrate Biodiversity Day. I was very pleased to see that brought forward. And all of you can also celebrate Biodiversity Day with hashtag Biodiversity Day. I invite you to do that, or check out the UNEP website, especially our colleagues in North America, where there's still time to see all of the various events that are going to be happening throughout the day. So that's the first thing you can do right from your desktop. We've heard in the conversations a real call for global ambition on climate change and environmental sustainability more broadly. And I think we have some really great examples that were brought forward in terms of the EU Green Deal. That's a phenomenal roadmap for success and implementing that, drawing out the concrete steps that can be taken to ensure that that ambition comes forward despite the recent crisis. It was great to hear about the Canadian plan for green recovery. That's going to be the kind of examples that we need to be looking for, in addition to ensuring that whatever we do is consistent with the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. If we're staying on the 2030 agenda, then we know we're staying on the right track. We heard a lot of emphasis about an inclusive approach, about engaging municipalities, and also, as the President referenced, Senator Whitehouse's comments about U.S. engagement in industry. It was, there's great opportunities to engage at all these levels, and it's a matter of ensuring that we're crafting the narrative to help resonate with the understanding of the individuals that we're trying to motivate. It's a hard thing to do, but it's essential. Industry came forward at the beginning of this year with really ambitious commitments. We saw that with Microsoft and their $1 billion commitment to invest in offsets and to go carbon neutral in the next decades. That's phenomenal. And now what we have to do is make sure to remind our industry partners that they are and have been committed to this, and make sure to keep them moving forward. That's the kind of positive reinforcement loops that my colleague from the UK, Sir Nigel Topping, was talking about, so that we remind governments what industry is already doing, we remind industry what governments are planning to do, and we keep everybody in a positive feedback loop. I also want to thank Turkey for bringing up the example about food systems vulnerability. It's so key. We will not succeed to address the climate crisis or the biodiversity crisis unless we fundamentally change our food systems. And we have to do it in a way that's inclusive, that is helping to alleviate poverty, that is helping with rural development. And overall, any of these approaches, it has to be founded in the concept that you can invest in nature for food production, for better, more efficient, safer, healthier food production. Investing in nature for people is the only thing that's going to resonate right now as everyone tries to figure out how to recover from this crisis. The last two things I'd like to say was just to respond to Belgium's comment about wildlife trade. It's essential that trade in wildlife is well managed. CITES lays out the roadmap for that and is very clear. Illegal wildlife trade is the fourth largest source of trafficking, but CITES does lay out ways for sustainable wildlife trade to occur in a way that helps ensure that local communities are involved and that local communities are motivated to conserve the wildlife in their backyard in ways that promote sustainable growth for the community and overall sustainable management and protection of the species. The final thing I'd like to say is there was a reference about the 2016 Frontiers report that UNEP produced that referenced the connection between zoonotic diseases and health. We are currently working on an update to that, which will be a special edition focused specifically on zoonotic diseases and health. We will begin to launch the initial stages of that at World Environment Day in early June. So please stay tuned, and that information will be coming available from there. And then I just want to conclude with, I heard a couple of different things about nature takes care of us, so we take care of nature, or there was another one earlier about don't mess with nature. And so I just want to conclude with what Amina Mohammed, our UN Deputy Secretary General, said during the Climate Action Summit, which she said, "We picked a fight with nature, and nature is fighting back. So watch out." Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share these remarks.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Susan Gardner, for your remarks.